Welcome to this short but complete presentation on how to install and maintain the Haldex self-adjusting brake adjuster. If you've been around the big rigs, you know that Haldex is the world leader with more than 8 million adjusters sold around the world. Haldex, truly a superior product that has been the worldwide choice of top trucking companies for more than 3 decades. Manufactured, tested, and distributed from this plant in America's heartland just east of Kansas City, Missouri. Inside this modern plant, computerized machines create each adjuster to exacting tolerances. Then, under strict quality control procedures, each adjuster is inspected. Plus, each one is fully tested before leaving the factory to assure it will function correctly when installed. As a truck service technician, you probably already know the basics of brake adjuster installation, but there are some special things about Haldex brake adjusters, such as those covered in this maintenance manual, that you will want to know to make your job easier. Learning those unique points is the purpose of this tape. Before we begin, let's review those basics every truck technician knows. Number 1, when installing brake adjusters, always chock the vehicle wheels. Nothing ruins your day faster than a truck that rolls when no one thought it would. Number 2, make sure the brake system has a minimum of 80 psi pressure to keep the spring brake fully released. However, if no air is available, the spring brake must be manually caged while you are installing the adjuster. All right, now let's go step by step through the installation procedures for 3 adjuster applications: tractor or truck drive axles, steer axles, and trailer axles. For each of these applications, we will explore important operations: the anchor bracket and adjuster installation, the importance of correct control arm location, and finally, brake adjustment. Near the end of this video, we will demonstrate the checking procedures and measurement of pushrod stroke. Let's go to our first installation, the drive axle. First, make sure the pushrod is fully released. Then install the anchor bracket under the air chamber mounting nut. You'll want to leave this nut just finger tight for now. Apply anti-seize lubricant to the S-cam spline, and then slip the adjuster onto the S-cam shaft. It's important that you make sure the adjusting hex points away from the air chamber. Now move the adjuster into the clevis by turning the adjusting hex clockwise. Then install the clevis pin. As the final part of this step, secure the adjuster to the S-cam shaft with a protection washer, a snap ring, and the cotter pin. You probably know that control arm location must be correct, or the lining to drum clearance will be less than normal, which means the brakes will be tight. Here's how you make that important adjustment. Rotate the control arm toward the air chamber. You will feel it come to an internal stop. Now, tap the control arm lightly toward the air chamber to make absolutely sure the arm is in the proper position. Secure the arm in this internal stop position with the washer, lock washer, and nut. But did the arm move while you were securing it? Tap it again before tightening the air chamber mounting nut. Our next step is an easy one, brake adjustment. Turn the 7/16 adjusting hex clockwise until you feel the lining touch the drum. Now, back off the adjusting hex counterclockwise approximately half a turn. You'll hear a ratcheting sound, which is perfectly normal and is not damaging the adjuster. This half turn creates a pushrod stroke that stays within the required limits of the air chamber. Here's the first of those special installations we talked about. In some cases, the anchor bracket is clamped to the S-cam tube or bolted to the brake spider. In both cases, and many others you'll encounter, the installation procedures are the same, only the configuration and location of the anchor bracket have changed. That completes the drive axle installation. Now let's install a Haldex adjuster on a steer axle and see the differences you'll encounter. First, you will install the anchor bracket not on the air chamber mounting bracket as you did with the drive axle, but clamped to the S-cam tube instead. Apply anti-seize lubrication to the S-cam spline. As in all brake adjuster installations, remember to fit the adjuster onto the S-cam shaft with the adjusting hex pointing away from the air chamber. Next, install the protection washer and snap ring. Move the brake adjuster into the clevis by turning the adjusting hex clockwise. Next, install the clevis pin and cotter pin. The next step, control arm location, is one area that's the same as the drive axle, and for the same reason. The arm position must be right to have the right lining to drum clearance. To get this proper clearance, rotate the control arm toward the air chamber until it comes to an internal stop. Secure that position by lightly tapping the control arm toward the air chamber. Next, rotate the anchor bracket so it matches the control arm position. Insert the anchor stud in the control arm slot, and then tighten the anchor screw and lock washer. Remember to tap the control arm again lightly, making sure the position is still right. The last operation in this step is to tighten the anchor bracket clamp to the S-cam tube to hold the control arm in its proper position. Brake adjustment is the same. First, turn the 7/16 adjusting hex clockwise until the lining contacts the drum. Next, back off the adjusting hex counterclockwise approximately half a turn. Again, you'll hear that ratcheting sound, which is normal. Here's another special case. On some steer axles, you'll find an anchor bracket strap clamped under the air chamber mounting nut. It's another case of the bracket shape making installation look different, but the installation really is the same. Now for the third and last installation, trailers. Let's start with the anchor bracket and adjuster installation. Our procedures are different right from the start. First, remove 2 of the S-cam support bolts. Then, apply anti-seize lubrication to the S-cam spline. Next, mount the anchor bracket plate to the S-cam support. Because of the added plate thickness, longer bolts and washers are supplied with the kit, and as you can see, they may be needed to make sure the mounting threads fully engage. Then tighten the anchor plate bolts. Place a protection washer between the adjuster and the S-cam bushing support. Now you're ready to fit the adjuster onto the S-cam shaft, remembering that the adjusting hex must point away from the air chamber. First, rotate the adjusting hex clockwise to move the brake adjuster into the clevis. Brush anti-seize lubricant on the clevis pin and install the clevis pin and cotter pin. Last, install the protection washer and snap ring. Here's another of those special cases. As the pointing finger shows, Eaton axles feature the anchor bracket plate mounted with only 1 bolt. As with other axles, the control arm must be located properly to have the correct lining to drum clearance. To get this proper clearance, rotate the control arm toward the air chamber until it comes to an internal stop. And tap it lightly to assure the proper position. When you have the control arm properly located, you can tell immediately because this installation indicator will be within this slotted area. Now, slip the anchor stud through the slotted plate, the lock nut, and the control arm bushing. Then, making sure the control arm does not move out of position and that the installation indicator stays in its slotted area, tighten the lock nut. Then, check the indicator again. Now, let's do brake adjustment in the same way as the others. First, turn the 7/16 adjusting hex clockwise until the lining contacts the drum. Next, back off the adjusting hex counterclockwise approximately half a turn. Again, you'll hear that perfectly normal ratcheting sound. Here's another special case. On this particular trailer axle, a spring steel plate connects the anchor bracket plate to the adjuster, but like the others, installation is the same. Note that this earlier adjuster model did not have the installation indicator. As we wrap this up, let's go through the checking procedures for a proper adjuster installation. First, visually inspect not only the adjuster for wear or damage, but the anchor bracket too, for looseness or for being bent or broken. Check the anchor stud for wear. Next, check the brake chamber mounting. 1, that the bolts are tight, and 2, that the bolts are properly aligned to keep the chamber push rod from interfering with the housing. Another important check is the angle between the center lines of the adjuster and push rod shaft. With the brake applied, check that this angle is approximately 90 degrees. Now for the all-important procedure, measuring stroke. The true test of a foundation brake is, does it maintain the proper push rod stroke? If you've checked the foundation brakes and they're okay, but the adjuster cannot maintain the proper stroke, it must be replaced because it cannot be operated like a manual brake adjuster. First, let's examine the air chamber types you will encounter most often. If the air chamber push rod stroke exceeds these limits shown in the right-hand column, the output force of the chamber will be greatly reduced, and the truck stopping distance will be longer, perhaps too long. You'll find the Type 36 in special heavy-duty applications, the Type 30 on most drive axles and just about all trailer axles, the Type 24 long stroke on Mack and Ford drive axles, and the standard types 24, 20, 16, and 12 on steer axles. Stroke should be measured carefully. With the brakes fully released, measure the distance from the air chamber face to the center of the clevis pin. Now, apply the brakes at 80 to 90 psi, the pressure recommended by CBSA, and again measure the distance from the chamber face to clevis pin center. Subtract the release dimension from the applied dimension, and the result is the total push rod stroke. You can also make this measurement by attaching a plastic tie to the push rod like this and simply measuring the plastic tie movement. A worn S-cam bushing will increase push rod stroke, so check these bushings at each PM inspection and replace these bushings at every reline. To check the adjuster's clutch mechanism, turn the 7/16 adjustment hex counterclockwise to check clutch torque. You will hear that normal ratcheting sound. Replace the adjuster if the clutch slips at less than 13 foot-pounds of torque. The lining to drum clearance is set by the position of the control arm. If the brake is too tight, check the control arm location. With the brake released, loosen the connection between the anchor bracket and the control arm. Now, try to rotate the arm toward the air chamber. If it moves, the control arm was misinstalled and probably the brakes were tight. As you can see, this control arm and adjuster was installed properly. If the arm had moved, the anchor bracket would have to have been relocated to a new control arm position. Last, tighten the anchor screw. After checking the control arm location, manually adjust the brake by tightening it until the lining hits the drum, and then back it off half a turn. By the way, adjusters should be lubricated at least every 50,000 miles or 3 months. No special grease is needed. It's easy to check the operation of a Haldex brake adjuster. Back off the adjusting hex to deliberately create too much clearance between the lining and the drum. The adjuster will immediately sense this excessive clearance and begin to correct it. To watch it correcting this excessive clearance, attach a wrench to the adjusting hex, holding it in place with a piece of paper or tape. Now apply the brakes over and over. Notice that the wrench moves on the release stroke, showing that inside the adjuster, The clearance is being corrected each time the brakes are applied. The adjustments will get smaller and smaller as the adjuster gets closer and closer to correct lining to drum clearance. The final operating stroke will not be reached until the vehicle is put into service and the linings have been burnished. We can't end this video without this reminder. The best self-adjusting brake adjuster will not cure other brake problems that can be discovered at the most unsuitable times, like at a weigh station. The foundation brake system must not be allowed to deteriorate, but must be properly maintained to have effective brakes, especially in heavy traffic. The self-adjuster has an important job to keep lining to drum clearance correct and to keep push rod stroke uniform, so every time the driver hits that pedal, each brake location does its share of the braking for the shortest possible stopping distance. And if that system isn't maintained, we all know that officials are out there waiting to remind us. One final thought. Remember that Haldex has everything you need to do the job right. Descriptive wall posters, installation manuals, catalogs, and other information. And if you have questions or need assistance, call the Haldex Technical Assistance Line, 1-800-821-8469. Haldex, self-adjusting brake adjusters, the one that works.